I'm Sarah, 29, standing in the middle of my childhood living room, surrounded by boxes filled with my belongings. I felt a mix of shock and anger. My mother, Linda, stood there with a clipboard, a forced smile on her face, while my father, Tom, shifted uncomfortably from one foot to the other. It all started when I came home early from a business trip. I was excited to surprise my family and maybe even casually mention that I'd been seriously looking for an apartment in the city, closer to my job. I worked as a senior graphic designer at a well-known firm in the heart of the city. After graduating from a top-tier art school at 24, I'd worked my way up the corporate ladder, putting in long hours and countless weekends. I lived in my parents' guest house on their large estate in the suburbs. It was a beautiful place, but the commute to work was killing me. About 2 months ago, during our Sunday family dinners, I started dropping hints about wanting to find a place in the city. My mother would frown and say things like, "The city is so noisy and dangerous. You're safe here with us." My father would just nod in agreement, though his tone was a bit more gentle. Last week, I flew to the city for a major client presentation. We wrapped up the project ahead of schedule, and my boss gave me the rest of the week off as a reward. As I drove up our long driveway, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked near the main house. It was my Aunt Lucy's car. She lived a couple of hours away and rarely visited without prior notice. When I got closer to the house, I saw several large boxes labeled with my name. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. I walked through the front door, and the sight that greeted me was like a nightmare. My mother was in the middle of the living room, directing my father and Aunt Lucy to pack my things. "Surprise, Sarah. We found you the perfect apartment in a nice, quiet suburb," my mother said cheerfully, as if she'd done me the greatest favor. She thrust a lease agreement into my hands. It was for a small studio apartment in a town far from the city, far from my work. I was in shock. "I never asked you to do this," I said, my voice trembling. "I want to live in the city, close to my job." My mother scoffed. "The city apartments are too expensive, and the neighborhoods aren't safe. This studio is perfect for a young woman like you." I felt anger rising inside me. "This is my decision, not yours. I can choose where I want to live." My mother just waved away my concerns. "We're just trying to help. You've been talking about moving out, but you haven't done anything about it." As I looked around the room, I noticed that they'd gone through my personal items. My journals, my old art projects, and even some family heirlooms were in the boxes. I demanded to know how they'd gotten into my guest house. My mother simply said, "We have keys. It's our property after all." I was furious. They'd invaded my privacy, made decisions about my life without my consent, and even given away some of my precious belongings. I found out that my grandmother's antique painting had been given to my cousin because I wasn't using it enough. I couldn't take it anymore. I told them that I wasn't moving into that studio. I'd find my own place in the city. My mother was outraged. She said that the lease was signed, the deposit was paid, and it was a done deal. I turned to my father, hoping for some support, but he just shrugged and said, "Your mother thought it would be a nice surprise." I realized that this pattern of control had been present throughout my life. My mother had always influenced my college choices, my career decisions, and even my dating life. I decided to leave the house. I couldn't be in that environment anymore. I called my younger sister, Lily, who lived in a small apartment in the city. She came to pick me up right away. On the drive to her place, I told her everything. She was shocked. "I knew they were controlling, but this is too much," she said. She also revealed that she'd heard my mother talking about letting some relatives use the guest house during a family gathering a few months ago. That night, lying on Lily's couch, I couldn't sleep. I knew I had to take control of my life. The next day, I reached out to a colleague, Mia, who had become a good friend. She offered me a room in her two-bedroom apartment in the city, in the exact neighborhood I'd been looking at. With newfound determination, I went back to my parents' house with Lily and Mia. I was clear and firm. I told my parents that I'd found my own place and that I wasn't moving into the studio. I also demanded that they respect my privacy and my decisions. My father seemed to understand, but my mother was still resistant. She tried to guilt-trip me, saying that they'd done everything out of love. But I stood my ground. Over the next few weeks, I settled into Mia's apartment. My parents tried to contact me, but I maintained my boundaries. My father's messages were more understanding, while my mother's were a mix of anger and guilt, inducing statements. A month later, I found my own one-bedroom apartment in the city. It was small but mine. On moving day, my mother called. She asked if she could come and see my new place. I was hesitant at first, but I agreed. When she came, she seemed different. She told me that she'd been seeing a therapist and that she was starting to understand that her need to control came from fear. She apologized for her actions. It wasn't easy, and the road to healing would be long. But I knew that I'd finally taken control of my life. I'd learned that true love means respecting someone's autonomy, and that independence is about having the freedom to make your own choices.